I call to order the March 11th, 2024 work session of the York County School Board at this time. Just a quick reminder, we follow Robert's Rules of Order. Hopefully we won't be blurting out any comments, and the chair needs to recognize, and this is a school board work session. This is how we get the information that we need in order to do our work to help the students and the teachers in the classrooms to make sure that we're improving student achievement. And one of the first things coming up is I requested some updates focused on student achievement. Knowing the data and analyzing it will help us do our work for all the different sections. Dr. Shandor, would you like to introduce the first presenters, please?
Absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Fairman. Good evening, board members. We have 6 presentations for you this evening, and there's also 4 discussion topics for the board. Our first presentation is mid-year academic progress updates. I'm going to ask Dr. Skinner, our Chief Academic Officer and staff. She has other staff members who I believe are going to be joining her as well. They're going to provide a summary regarding student performance on our PALs screener, and I'll let her explain to you what PALs is, as well as the Virginia Department of Education Winter Reading and Math Student Growth Assessment. Dr. Skinner.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. Tonight's presentation on mid-year academic progress will be delivered in 2 parts. The first part of the presentation will be an update on mid-year phonological awareness literacy screening, as we refer to as PALS assessment. And the second part of the presentation will focus on state growth assessment data for reading and math. As you look at the data this evening, I ask that you please keep a few things in mind. Mid-year data is intended to be formative, and therefore it's used to help plan for instruction, enrichment, and remediation. Both of these mid-year assessments are just one measure that division staff use when looking at student progress throughout the year. Tonight's presenters will provide an overview of mid-year students' performance and how that information is used at the division, school, and classroom level to support student academic progress. Now I'd like to invite Molly Brown, our coordinator of English and Language Arts, and Dr. Trinice Durio, coordinator of Special Education, up to share our PALS mid-year data.
Thank you, Dr. Skinner. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. Tonight, Dr. Durio and myself will be introducing our fall and mid-year PALS data for the 2023-2024 school year, and we'll also be sharing how this data informs our instruction in York County School Division. So let's talk a little bit about the PALS Literacy Screener. PALS stands for Phonological Awareness Literacy Screener, as Dr. Skinner has shared. We utilize PALS in York County to identify students that may have difficulty with reading and writing based on grade level expectations. PALS consists of multiple benchmark subtests that really inform how we provide instruction to support students with their reading and writing abilities. The state provides benchmark scores for grades K through 2 in both the fall and spring assessment windows. And all Virginia school divisions utilize the PALS assessment in fall and spring. Now let's talk about those fall and mid-year assessment windows. As previously stated, in fall, all Virginia school divisions are required to administer PALS with those benchmarks provided by the state. And our fall benchmarks are based on beginning of the year expectations for each grade level. However, the mid-year assessment is not required by all divisions in the state, but here in York County, we elect to give the mid-year assessment because we don't want to wait to be able to provide that strategic support for our students. So we administer the mid-year assessment to progress monitor. Now, the state does provide suggested benchmark ranges for the mid-year assessment, and here in York County, we then determine what would be meeting benchmark based on those suggested ranges for the mid-year assessment. And just to note, those subtests and benchmark ranges, they do increase in rigor from fall to mid-year. And we're going to talk about those subtests and those ranges for each grade level, along with some sample sets of data. So here we have the kindergarten PALs assessment. In the blue shaded areas, those are the different subtests that are a part of that sum score. Now, those sum scores are the benchmarks that the state provides for the fall and spring assessment. Across the top, you will see fall, mid-year, and spring, and you will see the ranges and the benchmark numbers increase as we go from fall to spring for the kindergarten assessment. Now we have a sample set of data listing our fall and mid-year students, the number of students, and the percentage of students meeting benchmark for fall and mid-year. Here for this kindergarten sample, we actually see that our students, all students meeting benchmark in fall was around 85%. While the ranges increase, in this particular school, we see an increase in our students meeting benchmark. This is because our teachers understand the rigor required to meet those spring benchmarks, and they provide that explicit instruction to go beyond to the spring levels. Now let's talk about grade 1. This is perhaps the most complex PALS assessment because you will see that the subtests in blue are part of that sum score, but not only do the ranges increase, but also the complexity of the assessment. So here we can see in fall, they're given pre-primer or essentially end of kindergarten content, and they're expected to reach grade 1 content by the spring. Because of this increase in rigor, we expect our students in mid-year, we expect them to struggle with some of those benchmarks, which is exactly why we give the mid-year assessment, so we can be proactive about the instruction we provide our students. In this sample of a grade 1 fall and mid-year PALS data, we can see that decrease that we talked about. So we had about 87% of our students meeting benchmark in fall, and in mid-year that number did decline to about 83.5%. We expect this decrease in our students meeting benchmark, which is exactly why we give the mid-year assessment. We want to be sure that our students are getting the intervention they need in a timely manner. However, there are successes in this data set, and that's why we break it down into our reporting groups. As you can see, our English learner group of students, they actually increased in their percentage meeting the benchmark. So when we have division level discussions and school level discussions, we celebrate that success and we ask what teachers were doing. In this particular example, we started to provide training for our English as second language teachers on foundational skills and provide them resources. And we could see that that had a positive impact on our students, so we implement that throughout the division. For our grade 2 PALS assessment, we do have 2 categories for that sum score, and they do increase slightly as they go through from that first grade level to second grade content. For this particular sample set of data for grade 2, we can see that our students meeting benchmark in fall were not quite at the status of our other schools that we saw in that sample set. So our teachers and our students worked very hard using evidence-based literacy instruction, and we could see that our students had an increase in the number meeting benchmark in second grade. This tells us that they are projected to do better on that spring assessment as we are providing those proactive, strategic instruction for our students. At this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Durio to talk a little bit about how we use the PALS data to inform instruction at the division, school, and classroom levels.
Thank you, Molly. Our PALS data is analyzed simultaneously across the division, school, and classroom level in order to inform our instruction. As Molly stated, we work collaboratively through this process, and I'll first begin by talking about how the division works together to provide a big picture lens of this PALS data and determine common trends of both strengths and weaknesses. Our division-wide analysis occurs at the school, grade level, and among our reporting groups. Our goal is that all students will meet the benchmarks that we discussed earlier. Our data provides insights into the gaps that we already see, and we collaborate to offer additional professional development to our teachers and instructional staff. This is a focus on modeling and coaching our general and special education teachers on explicit instruction. As Molly stated, we also have been intentional this year with our L teachers, and our L coordinator, Rika Harold, has really worked to provide additional resources in the area of literacy in order to ensure that our teachers are ready for that instruction. We also look at positive trends, and so we've noticed that we've also been very intentional about providing our letters training this school year and previous school years. And we want to make sure that we are able to have foundational literacies knowledge among our teachers, and this was done through that letters training. Throughout the process of data analysis, we share this information with our schools. And while the work at the division level is very important, we are really proud of what our schools do to take that big picture lens and translate it into personalized individual student names and looking at their strengths and areas of growth. At the school level, one way we collaborate is through professional learning communities. And that's when a group of educators come together, such as our reading specialists, our teachers or administrators, and even our literacy coaches, to identify ways that we can review the data and determine actionable next steps. One of their key tasks is to determine where the school needs support overall. They may decide that they need more data, and then they'll focus their time on sharing strategies with each other. For example, a school's data may show that their second graders declined on our oral reading and context subtest. They then decide to collaborate to collect more data and determine that long vowel patterns are really an area that they should focus on. They then prioritize using a combination of decodable text and explicit phonics instruction to provide those students with increased practice. Looking at the data at the school level really provides an opportunity for grade levels to collaborate on common trends. In this next section, Molly and I will share a few more examples on how PALS data is used to inform teachers' daily instruction.
Thank you. We know that the magic of education happens in the classroom where our teachers and our students are working hard on that basic everyday instruction. So with the work that they've done in those professional learning communities, teachers then compare their students' data to what they have already taught through the YCSD phonics and morphology scope and sequence. With that phonics and morphology scope and sequence, regardless of students' entry point based on subtest, we still expose all students to grade level content. This ensures that even if there is a gap in student learning, that we're not widening the gap by holding back on the grade level instruction. So they usually have that in a whole group or whole classroom setting. Additionally, if we notice that there is a component that a lot of students miss, that classroom teacher will then reteach some of those commonly missed features. As Dr. Durio mentioned, if long vowel patterns or vowel teams are an area of weakness for the entire class, then that teacher might reteach with a different, more hands-on approach so that all students are able to benefit from that learning. Furthermore, the teacher may then illustrate those phonics features or those long vowel features as they're reading grade level text to address all of the other English standards that we also assess and have to have our students proficient in by the end of their grade level year. So they might highlight this is a long vowel word, and because I know this pattern, I'm able to decode it and then glean more meaning from what I'm reading.
As part of YCSD's literacy model, we really want to ensure that all students within our classrooms receive explicit small group instruction. So that means whether a student is exceeding the benchmarks, meeting the benchmark, or approaching it, we ensure that instruction is designed based on what their area of need is. For example, if we had 3 students having difficulty with blending sounds, we would take a multi-sensory approach, maybe using visual cues in order to help them blend those sounds together. And while they're doing that with our teacher, the other students in the classroom are still engaged in small group instruction. They may be applying that skill by using grade level text. Our students with disabilities are embedded throughout all of those groups, and we're ensuring that they're being provided with specially designed instruction and accommodations during this time. Molly will now share how we provide additional support to all of the students who are meeting or approaching that benchmark.
So our students falling below benchmark are required by VDOE, or Virginia Department of Education, to have 2.5 hours a week of targeted intervention. Now here in York County, we do like to go above and beyond and support even more students than what's required. So if they are not meeting the benchmark by a small margin, then we include those students in our required intervention of at least 2.5 hours a week. We want to ensure that the benchmark is not the ceiling, that it is the floor, and we are providing as much targeted intervention to as many students that need it. So students will receive their intervention based on those subtest scores so that the intervention is targeted to their particular needs. Those interventions, as well as student progress, which is monitored by quick little checks on the different types of learning that they need, such as the phonics features or grade level reading and context, and those are documented in the PALs intervention plan. Now, our families receive that PALs intervention plan usually in the fall if they're identified, but they may also receive one in mid-year if they are a student that wasn't identified, but we noticed that they need some targeted support due to our mid-year benchmark that we use here in York County. And those families are then informed of student progress, sometimes at conference night, but definitely throughout the progress as well, especially if they start with that intervention plan in the mid-year assessment window. Now, the division and school level data for each grade level that was shown in our samples is provided in slides 23 through 55.
The next opportunity for our students to take this spring PALS assessment will be April 29th through May 10th. The benchmarks will continue to be provided by the state, and we'll use that information to inform both our summer academy recommendations, our curriculum writing, and our professional development planning.
And now that we've gotten pretty comfortable with the PALS assessment, don't get too comfortable yet, because the Virginia Department of Education is moving to the VALS assessment, the Virginia Language and Literacy Screening System. We are excited about this change because it is more aligned with the science of reading that our teachers have received that LETRS training for. The subtests are more comprehensive, so we won't have to give as many additional assessments to determine our students' particular needs. And unlike the a little bit complicated PALS assessment, it really shows growth over time by measuring students on grade level content from the beginning. So we are excited about this opportunity. And at this time, this concludes our presentations, and we are happy to answer any questions you may have about our fall and mid-year PALS data.
Are there any questions or comments?
I had two. Back at the, I believe it was the school level, when we had the PLCs, that's done within each grade level team, right? Okay, that's one thing I want to make sure of. And when you have a targeted intervention, who completes it?
So for the most part, those targeted interventions are provided by our reading specialists. We did implement a SIPS program for phonological and phonemic awareness, and our paraeducators have been trained in that program. But for the most part, our students that are below benchmark receive intervention from the reading specialist.
Okay, have you noticed the number of targeted interventions go up over the past year or so?
As I would have to get back to you on the specifics of that data. I will say that based on our fall's data, our fall PALS data, we are now back to pre-COVID numbers, so we don't have as many students identified.
Well, then that answered my question.
Okay.
There you go.
I wasn't sure if you were mentioning the types of interventions
Yeah,
and doing different ones, but yes, we are back to pre-COVID numbers based on our fall's data,
Good.
our fall PALS data.
I have a question about the
Yes.
grade one data from mid-year to the spring. I know there was a little bit of a dip. Did you happen to identify any common patterns when you looked at that data? Were there common patterns that you saw that led to that little bit of a dip?
So based on our data, what we normally see with grade 1, we see a dip in the automatic word recognition category. The phonics instruction that we give really supports our spelling data, but that automatic word recognition, it's not always decodable. And at times it's based on just grade level words. And with the science of reading, we don't memorize high frequency words as much. So we have noticed that data, and that's part of the reason why we're so excited about the VALS assessment.
Thank
Thank you.
Well, I would just like to say thank you for this presentation, and actually just Dr. Skinner. I was not aware that we're not required to do the mid-year testing, and it's just, as a parent, it means a lot that we're investing in our children just as a benchmark to see where we at and to improve it for the rest of the year. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I guess the comment that I had is thank you very much, not only for doing the overall, but also sectioning it out for each school. How are you looking at improving all of our schools? You know, overall, we can take a look, but I know there may be some, and I will take a closer look now that I have this data to see if there are certain areas that we need to be focusing on more in certain districts or whatever, but how are you handling that for the individual schools?
So as Dr. Durio mentioned, after we look at the division big picture lens, then we take consideration to the particular schools if we notice an uptick in their percentage of students not meeting benchmark. And we really collaborate and brainstorm with the schools. Sometimes there are extenuating circumstances and we need to provide additional professional development or have our reading specialists push into the classroom. But those are really conversations that we have at the school level to then determine their particular needs.
Okay, thank you very much.
And one last thing, it sounded like you may have already answered this, that we'll monitor the PALs versus the VALS testing. We'll still monitor the same way and respond the same way that we do now?
That is a wonderful question. We are still awaiting further guidance on what exactly that VALS assessment will look like. It's being piloted in other divisions. I was actually speaking to another division, and they're not keeping any of the materials because it might change. So as we have further guidance on how we can monitor student progress, we will do the same overall format that we do working at the division, school, classroom, and independent student level.
Okay, so and I heard you also mention that there's less assessments with the VALS testing, which may be a positive, or...
So there might be less need for additional assessments.
Additional,
But
okay.
the VALS assessment is more comprehensive, and
Right.
as of its iteration right now, has more subtests. But then that would negate the need for us to have different assessments to ensure we're meeting our students' needs.
Perfect. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Thank
Very
you.
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is wonderful. I really appreciate it, Dr. Skinner, and everybody who worked with you for putting that presentation together so that we could see this, because it will help the school board figure out what we need to do to support you and support the students, as well as the teachers in the classroom. So I greatly appreciate your time in that.
Thanks to both of you. Next, Ms. Skinner is going to provide some information related to the winter reading and math student growth assessment. Dr. Skinner?
Thank you. So the second part of our presentation tonight, as Dr. Shandor shared, is going to focus on data from grades 3 through 8 reading and math state growth assessment. Tonight's presentation will provide an overview of fall and winter student performance and how that information is used at the division, school, and classroom level to support student academic progress. I'm going to ask this time for Lisa Beasley, our coordinator of testing and accountability. I'm going to invite Dr. Trinice Dorio back up to the podium, who's our coordinator of special education, and then Carrie Enot, who is our coordinator of mathematics, to come up here, and they're going to share this data with you tonight.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. This evening, we will share information regarding the state growth assessments. So the state growth assessments are given in grades 3 through 8 in both reading and mathematics. This was determined from legislation voted on and approved by the General Assembly in 2021. The growth assessments are required to be administered twice a year. So we administer those assessments in the fall, and then in the mid-year timeframe, what we reference winter. The growth assessments are aligned to the standards of learning assessments, but as you'll see on the next slide, are shorter in length. And the state growth assessment, or the assessment window, concludes with our students taking their spring SOL tests in May and June. So here, this chart just briefly summarizes our growth assessments. So in third grade, our students see an abbreviated number of questions on this particular assessment as compared to our standards of learning assessments that our students take in the spring. These assessments are what we refer to as computer adaptive, or CAT assessments, which does provide our students with flexibility in the assessment items that they're going to see. Our third grade students this fall saw an assessment that had content primarily from the third grade, but again, that computer adaptiveness of the test meant that students could also see content from second grade or from fourth grade. In the winter, this continued to be the same. Our third graders saw a consistent assessment both over the fall and the winter growth assessments. In grades 4 through 8, you can see the number of items increases from that third grade assessment up to those 4th through 8th grade assessments. This year, the state elected to make our growth assessments in grades 4 through 8 focused on previous grade level content. So for example, a student that is a 5th grader this year saw an assessment that was primarily 4th grade content. The intention here was really to give us a sense of kind of where students should have ended the year. And if we think about our population, if we had students who've just moved to the area and were unable to take SOL tests last spring, this gave us an opportunity to get a benchmark score for them. In the winter, what the state elected to do was actually move the assessment to current grade level content. So that same 5th grade student actually saw an assessment that had primarily 5th grade content, but had that flexibility to go down to 4th grade or up to 6th grade content. The growth assessments, prior to the growth assessments in the fall, we did communicate with families via a parent letter to make them aware of the growth assessments and provided information on how they could access their students' score reports. So these two charts might be a little overwhelming at first. The state scores the growth assessments using a score called a vertical scaled score instead of giving students an SOL scaled score like we see in the spring. This year, the state elected to group or categorize the vertical scaled scores into 3 ranges. A vertical scaled score can range from 900 to 2,000. And this year on these vertical scaled scores, again, they group them into these 3 categories. So starting over on the right-hand side, the category of a student being generally well prepared. Then we add this middle column, which is students at risk. And then finally, the last group, which is students who need additional support. These groupings, again, are identified by the Virginia Department of Education and help inform our work as educators and in our buildings to identify what students might need some more targeted and specific interventions as we use this data to drive our instruction. At this time, Carrie and Trinice will share more information about the use of the data at the division, school, and classroom level.
Once the assessment window has concluded and the data is pulled, disaggregated, and shared at the division, school, and classroom level, it is important to acknowledge that the state growth assessment is just one opportunity to evaluate our students on their understanding and application of current content. At the division level, we work to align their performance with other platforms that they're assessed in, like their Mastery Connect division unit assessments, DIBELS for reading, and their work in the IXL platform. The data is collected during the disaggregation is correlated to our division pacing guides and curriculums. They're shared with the Assessment Compliance Coordinators, or ACCs, the division instructional coaches, and the reading specialists to be reviewed for overall areas of strengths and weaknesses, and are used to collaborate with the building level staff to determine a plan for support that may include training, modeling, and instructional coaching. At both the elementary and middle school levels, general and special education teachers work together with the instructional coordinators and coaches to devise steps that are data-driven. So what you see in this case is you have a situation at a school, and in the library they're all going through the data together, and in that room are the ACC working directly with those grade level teams of English teachers and special education teachers and math teachers, and just kind of coming together and really digging into ways that they can support. We also have a situation for a division PLC of math teachers, and when we pull those, it's the math teachers and the special ed teachers together who collaborate with those students. And then we also have our elementary lead teachers digging into their data as well. Here is a sample from the grade 4 math. If you follow along the highlighted row showing the vertical scaled score bands that Lisa referenced earlier, you see from fall to winter, the percent of students in the needs support band dropped, while we saw growth in our students in the middle and upper bands. This positive movement by students is worth celebrating because with the fall assessment included primarily previous grade level content, the winter assessment measured on grade level content. The division data for each grade level is for English and math is provided at the end of this slideshow on 19 through 30. Here is a sample of the data disaggregated from the grade 4 math winter administration, specifically in the number and number cent state reporting category. Each row is broken down by the standard of learning and the item descriptor. It shows the number of students who responded correctly, as well as the number of students who responded incorrectly. As this data is shared, the division highlights in gray where students were asked questions on standards that have not yet been taught per the division curriculum and pacing guides. This is very valuable data as teachers can use the data as a pre-assessment and design their instructional time around teaching new content and reteaching areas of need. Again, the data in these tables is used in conjunction with other key sources and help drive the support from the division across all the schools. Dr. Trinise Durio will now explain how the state growth assessment is used at the school level.
Our division instructional staff meet with departments and grade level PLCs to review that disaggregated data, as well as looking at student performance on additional assessments. Overall areas of need are highlighted, such as items that are highly assessed and highly missed, as Carrie shared earlier. Teams review that overall grade level data and share strategies and resources to support the skills that may need reteaching or remediation, and to better align our specially designed instruction with our services and our accommodations. This is a great time for schools to look at what specific training is needed at our schools. For example, I'm currently working with one of our schools that really decided that our paraeducators needed a little bit more training since they're such a valuable resource to our instructional strategies, and so we're working with them and coaching them through some of our literacy resources. Carrie's now going to give us another example specifically of how our PLCs work at the school level.
So here you can see at one of our elementary math lead meetings, the lead teacher is working with her grade level team to incorporate the number lines to engage a small group in comparing and ordering numbers. So we have purchased these materials for every teacher, and we also purchased them for the special education teachers and our English learner teachers as well. And then we went out and did training. Each of our leads did the training based on their grade appropriate with their groups on how to use them in the classroom, and they've already shown to be very valuable in the classes. And then on the right, you see a school-based pre-algebra 8 team consisting of 2 math teachers and 2 special education teachers as they collaborate with our secondary math coach on activities that can be done in small groups that address one of the high needs areas identified by the winter growth data.
Have a quick question. If you could just explain to people listening who might not know what PLC means.
It's the professional learning communities.
Thank you.
They usually consist of the general education teacher at the grade level, the special education teacher, administrators, our coaches go and join those as much as they can.
Right. Thank you very much.
I'm now going to share our last layer of data at that classroom level. And so again, we use the growth assessments to review the classroom data. And we identify content that might need to be retaught based on having that high number of incorrect responses and being frequently assessed on our student growth assessments. Our teachers plan for the opportunities to do this by restructuring their classroom into common areas of needs. We may have some small groups, but those small groups will include all students. And so those who need additional support, as well as those that are at risk, and additionally those that are generally well prepared, will be working in a small group. Our educators work collaboratively to review student IEP goals and make adjustments as needed. For example, we may notice that a student with a weakness in executive functioning may show a decline in their performance with multi-step word problems. And so the IEP team may meet to ensure that there aren't any additional accommodations that we can put in place to support them in that area. Whether we're at the division, our school, or our classroom level, our goal is to provide that high-quality instruction with that targeted practice to achieve that grade level proficiency. So that is why we spend so much time on the data and breaking it down at each level so that we'll be prepared at the end of the school year. This concludes our presentation, and we open it up for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? I just have a couple. Back on the slide that says division-level data disaggregation, you listed three things. One was the IXL, one was DIBBLE, and one was something else. If you could please explain those.
So we utilize an assessment platform called Mastery Connect, where we develop division-wide common assessments across the grade levels and subjects. And then those assessments are delivered through Canvas, and our students take them, and we're able to pull common data between how the students perform, and we can disaggregate that data by our reporting groups as well.
Okay. When the students take these tests, are they paper and pencil? Are they 100% on the computers, or is it kind of a hybrid of both?
So our second grade is the first grade that began the Master Connect assessments in math. The first semester, they do that on paper, and then the second grade teachers begin that transition to having them practice the online test taking as well. And so we make them available online, and then the teachers kind of decide at what point they go fully online. But starting in third grade through eighth grade, and then also with Algebra 1, the tests are administered online, with the exception of our students with disability that qualify for a paper pencil test, and then those tests are printed.
That's the case for our state growth assessments and our SOL tests as well. So all of our state growth assessments and SOL tests are administered online, unless a student has an appropriate accommodation that might warrant a need for a paper pencil test. So for example, large print, Braille, or a student who might need their assessment chunked in a way that provides them that opportunity to take the assessment over multiple days. So we're mirroring what they're doing on their state assessments with our IXL assessments as well as our Mastery Connect assessments.
Okay. And I had another question on the additional fourth grade winter data. It was quick going through the slides, but it looked like some of the numbers were kind of high in incorrect numbers. And I wanted to know, are these problems for beginning fourth grade, or are they end fourth grade?
So one thing that we do during our data dives is we do look at those high areas that are measured incorrect, but we also want to pay, and this is why we are very deliberate in including the count as well as the percent. So if you notice the first three rows, they're 100% incorrect, 50% incorrect, and 100% incorrect, but that was only one student or two students.
Okay.
So what we do when we go in and work with our teachers on these data dives is we'll highlight highly missed and highly assessed questions. So numbers where they are a high percentage of the total test and a high number of students saw that standard. And so that's where we really focus our follow-up. This is where we need to go in and build in other activities and build in time in our curriculum and pacing to go back and reteach those areas. And we also help them with designing small group instruction if it's a little bit smaller numbers of students that need that.
And just as a reminder, just as a reminder with our winter growth assessment, so in this case, this is fourth grade data, but as I mentioned, there is that flexibility that students could see third grade content or see fifth grade content. So you'll notice here in the case of those ones at the top that Carrie just mentioned, those are actually third grade item descriptors. So that's a student who answered some fourth grade content and then based off of that content, dropped down and was able to see third grade content. And just as a reminder, when we look at this data table and when we look at all of our winter data, we had a number of item descriptors that have not yet been taught, right? So content that hasn't yet been taught. This is a state growth assessment, so we give the same assessment across the state. And we recognize that we're a school division that starts towards the end of August, whereas other school divisions in the state of Virginia might start at the beginning of August. So it's important to recognize that when we look at this data.
I understand. Are there any further questions or comments? Thank you so much for presenting this and filling us in on all of the detailed information. Greatly appreciate it. Let's see, moving right along. Do we have the middle school schedule? Dr. Shandor?
We actually have the Division Literacy Plan update next.
Oops, I'm sorry.
No worries. I did want to
that's
say
right.
a special thank you to Dr.
that.
Skinner, Ms. Beasley. I almost said the unsinkable Molly Brown. And for those of you out there, Google, no, I'm just kidding. I think that she was in Titanic. But anyway, I want to thank Dr. Dorio and I want to thank Carrie Enot. They found out they were doing this presentation on Tuesday morning, and I think they did a great job. I appreciate you sharing that detailed information with everyone. So next we have Dr. Candy Skinner, who's going to work with Ms. Head. They're going to be providing information on the Division Literacy Plan. Dr. Skinner.
Thank you. Good evening again, Madam Chair and members of the board. Tonight's division staff will provide an overview of the Virginia Department of Education Division Literacy Plan requirements and an update on the development of our own York County School Division Literacy Plan. The Virginia Literacy Act was passed by the Virginia General Assembly in 2022 and later expanded in 2023. It focuses on improving literacy outcomes for preschool through grade 8 students throughout the Commonwealth. The Virginia Department of Education requires all school divisions to develop a well-articulated division literacy plan. Christina Head, our Associate Director of Elementary Instruction and Academic Programs, is leading this work for our school division, and she's here tonight. She's going to provide you an update on the development of our division plan.
Thank you. Good evening. Okay. So on January 8th, I provided the board an update of the components and requirements of the Virginia Literacy Act, also known as VLA. With that, those requirements of the VLA requires all school divisions to develop and submit a division literacy plan. And so as mentioned in January, the purpose of this division literacy plan is really for divisions to outline how they will meet the expectations of the components of the VLA. And so we recently received the template of the division literacy plan and the instructions on how to complete that on February 29th. And then, just this past Thursday, the Virginia Department of Education sent out an update on literacy, and they provided another version of the template, as well as an updated instruction guide, and they determined that next year's plan will be for K-5, kindergarten through 5th grade only. In addition, they extended the deadline of the due date of the plan that was supposed to be due June 3rd. They extended that to July 1st. And so I'm going to show you some of these two documents that I mentioned. Also, they're uploaded on board docs. So on this slide, you can see the 6 sections of the template for the division literacy plan. And I'm going to show you that template as well. So here on the left side, you see the template for the division literacy plan, and on the right side is a screenshot of the instructions that we were given to give us guidance as we develop that plan. So I'm going to click that to go to that template that's in Board Docs. I will enlarge that a little bit. And so you can see here on this template, each section, the 6 sections that I had shown on the slide before, it provides a brief description or directions, and then it gives, the new updated template gives a couple of examples. And so you can see here, section 1 is planning for a comprehensive communication. That has our literacy vision, our developed literacy vision here, as well as the stakeholders that we communicate that vision and plan to. And so we'll fill that out as far as what our stakeholders and our plan for communication. In section 2, we have to list the required, highly qualified, the quality instructional materials. And last meeting, we brought to you our adoption of our highly qualified instructional materials from their list that we have to use. You can see divisions are required to use that. But as well, we'll also indicate on this template any supplemental and interventions that we plan to use next school year. Section 3 of the template has us listing the specific Virginia Literacy Act training that we will select for our teachers to utilize. And so we will list, they gave an example here of letters, which we have also have done and will continue, but we are able to list the trainings that we are going to choose from the list that the VLA is supposed to provide us later in this spring. Section 4 here, we have to document which assessments we'll use to monitor student progress during the school year. So you can see here the example they gave was that new literacy screener or called PALs, and we have to list how often we'll give it and also who will be responsible for that administration. And section 5 of the plan, really, we have to provide information of how we as a division is going to monitor the progress of our division literacy plan throughout the year. So here's some examples here, how it has some classroom walkthroughs that the principals will do and how often. So we have to list what tool we'll use, who's responsible for monitoring that, and then how often as well. And section 6 here is the final section, and it asks us, how are we going to involve our parents, caregivers, and community in our literacy plan? And the first part of that talks about the student reading plan. So if students do not meet the benchmarks on the screener, like the VALs, we will be required to do a student reading plan, and we have to involve our parents in the development and the progress of that student intervention plan. We haven't yet seen what that looks like, but we're very prepared for that as we've been giving, as you heard, PALS intervention plans for many years now. And then we'll also have to describe how we will build in our family, our communities, our caregivers and parents into our literacy program. And then last here, you can see here that it requires us to not only submit it, but we have to post, maintain and update that plan on our division website. So we'll develop a page on our division website that will post information and our plan. We'll put it right there. But it also requires us to post the job description and contact of all of our reading specialists, as well as a dyslexia specialist that we have in our division. And so that is the plan that we template that we are required to complete. And on the left side, on the right side, this document here, it's also in Board Docs, but it really gives each section and it gives the divisions some more descriptions and some guiding questions to help as we build that plan. And so the state also has provided 4 training sessions to help divisions understand this plan since it's new. And so they provided those 4. The first one was recently the end of February, and then we have our second training this Wednesday, and then another one in the end of April, And the final one is in May, May 16th. And we're able to bring a team of up to 7 division leaders to those trainings. So that's very helpful. So you can see on this screen here our list of our 7 that we're bringing to these trainings on how to develop that literacy plan. And so this slide shows a tentative timeline. As you've seen some of the changes that recently happened, even last Thursday, this is as of now our plan to develop our division literacy plan. So you can see here our training in March. On March 13th, we'll go to Chesapeake and do a regional training with other Region 2 schools. And we'll begin to develop that literacy plan, taking a look at the components of it, each section and what it has included. And then in April, we have that 3rd training that is at the end of April. But in April, we plan to meet with focus groups. We'll meet with focus groups of parents and teachers and building administrators and reading specialists and special ed teachers, all of our stakeholders, to really find out, ask questions of what they'd like to see in the plan and what they feel is important in a division plan. So we'll do that through the month of April, maybe through May a little bit, because we have our last training on not till May 16th. And then we'll really spend that time finalizing that plan, the division plan. And then we'll bring that draft plan to you at your June meeting, which is June 10th. At the work session, we'll do a presentation to go through all the steps and how we created this plan. And then it will come for your approval at your regular meeting that same day. So that is an update where we are with the division literacy plan. I welcome any questions you might have.
Are there any questions?
So for this plan, parents are to be involved in intervention. How would that look like? How much would they be involved in that?
Sure.
process?
So the students that are in need of intervention that do not meet the benchmarks, they will have to have that plan, that student plan. So we'll bring them in and have them be involved with that development plan so they understand a little bit more about it. But the VLA also is going to provide parents with free resources online. So we'll post those on that web page that I mentioned to you. We'll be sure that that page has those free resources that parents can use with their students at home.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you so much for this. It's great seeing the progression, and I know how challenging it is when the times and the expectations get changed, and thank you so much for being on top of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Head. If I could add one thing, board members, we did put something in your folders this evening. It's just a sort of a snapshot one-pager of all of the changes for 23, 24, and beyond. This comes to us from the Virginia Department of Education. I'm not going to read it all to you, but there's 5 or 6 bullets under English, 4 or 5 under math, 2 under history, 2 under science, 3 under accountability, as well as the Virginia Alternate Assessment Program. So I just want to make sure that you had that information. Our instructional team has a big, heavy lift moving through the spring and summer to prepare for next year.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Yep. All right, our last presentation from instruction is going to be the middle school schedule. Dr. Skinner?
Thank you. And this may be the last time you hear from me this evening. We'll see. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. In March 2023, the school division made the decision to form a middle school schedule committee to conduct a thorough review of the current middle school schedule and provide recommendations that best meet the needs of our students. The committee is comprised of teachers, parents, counselors, school board office staff, and school administrators. I have to say, just on an aside, how much I really appreciate the time that each of the committee members gave to us. We had a number of meetings. I think we started meeting on September 14th of 2023. We had 6 meetings, all of which were in the evening, and so they gave up time from their families to come, and they provided very candid feedback to us, and we really appreciate that. Throughout these meetings, the committee analyzed the benefits and challenges of our current model. They researched schedule options. They reviewed focus groups and survey data. They conducted simulations of proposed schedule options. They conducted a decision and a problem potential problem analysis, and then they provided a recommendation for a possible middle school schedule. Dr. Sherlock is here tonight. He is our Associate Director of Secondary Instruction and Academic Programs. He has led this work, and he's going to share an update from the committee and the work that's been done.
Good evening. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Dr. Shandor. I'm here tonight to provide an update on the work the Middle School Schedule Committee has completed since our last board update in January. In addition, I'll also provide the recommendation that they have for our middle school bell schedule. I'd like to first review just a few of the items that occurred before that January update, just to make sure we're on the same page. As Dr. Skinner said, our committee reviewed data from surveys from our family and middle school families and our middle school staff, along with focus group feedback from students, parents, and our teachers. In addition, they reviewed a number of middle school bell schedules from our neighboring divisions. And finally, they utilized the decision analysis protocol to evaluate our current middle school bell schedule, our current high school 2AB bell schedule, and then a block with a shorter period bell schedule. And all that really is they fit two 45-minute periods into that 90-minute block. Okay, so they looked at those three schedules. Now let's fast forward to our January 23rd meeting, which was after the board update. So this is all new information for you all. The committee wanted to review information and get feedback on what those proposed schedules look like using current student course data, the course selections, and staffing. And what we do is we can run a simulation with our master scheduler to get what we call a fill rate. And all a fill rate really is we want to see how many student schedules will be full, the percentage of students that have a full schedule in our scheduler. And so typically, as a former middle school principal, you'd want to see at the very least a mid to low to mid 80% fill rates. All that means is 80% of the kids have a complete schedule in the scheduler. And you have to tweak that a little bit and potentially even hand schedule to get to the 100% rate that we want all kids to have a schedule. As you see, the numbers in front of you are when that simulation was ran for our current high school bell schedule, again, using the courses our current students are taking, we had a fill rate of 13%. That meant only 13% of our students had a full schedule when they applied that bell schedule. That block with a shorter period schedule had a fill rate of 37%. Obviously, the committee was a little bit disappointed at those low fill rates, but again, that was information that they wanted and that they looked at that they looked at. After that, they completed a potential problem analysis where, again, and this is a review, the potential problem analysis is just what the title says. It's looking at potential problems, potential barriers, concerns that, in this case, a proposed schedule would have. And again, so they did that for the high school 2AB schedule and the block with shorter periods schedule. And after they ran that, they found a number of potential problems, which again, that's typical, right? Anytime you have a new schedule or something new, you're going to have potential problems that you're trying to fend off. You're trying to be proactive in preventing those from happening. However, one of those potential problems was that low fill rate, that low percentage of kids having a complete schedule, and that rose to the top as a major concern of our committee. So major, as a matter of fact, that they did not feel comfortable putting forward either one of those two proposed bell schedules as a recommendation. However, and as Dr. Skinner said, these folks worked a long time. They probably know master scheduling better than I do now. They worked hard. They heard from our community, from our parents, our teachers, even our students, that they felt a daily English class, which was really the ultimate goal here, a daily English class was important to make sure students were proficient in those standards. And so what they did is they actually proposed an additional schedule that they wanted to look at. And they looked at our current middle school schedule, And they asked, why can't we just try to add a daily English class to our current schedule? And so we're calling that our current middle school schedule with daily English. As it was late on that January night, we had to postpone looking at that schedule, and so the committee decided to reconvene in February to conduct a decision analysis on that addition of that schedule. So now we come to our February 29th meeting, where the committee looked at the schedules in front of you. Now, on the right-hand side of the screen is that current middle school schedule with daily English added. And as you can see, it's basically just replacing that elective 2 on the left-hand side, which is our current schedule, with an English class. So now the student has English on A day and a B day, so every day. And again, that took the place of that elective class. In addition, based on the work of the committee from previous, they felt it was necessary to add an additional criteria to the decision analysis portion of the review. They felt that it was important to have any schedule they put forward must be able to work. It must work with our current students, or why else would you put it forward? And so they created an additional criteria that's highlighted in yellow, which is the ability to schedule students into the scheduling program with minimal staffing increases with at least an 80% fill rate. And that was a must, which means that if a option does not meet that criteria, it does not move forward in the process. So what the committee then conducted the decision analysis with now a total of 4 schedules, right? The original 3, the current middle school schedule, the current high school schedule, the block with shorter period schedule, and that newly proposed current schedule with daily English. When they conducted the decision analysis, they have to run those musts first. And those 2 schedules, because of that low percentage of the fill rate, did not meet the criteria for that 80%. So those were not moved forward. For reference, that daily English class with our current schedule, that had a fill rate of 92%. All right, so 92%, that's typically what you want to see in a schedule as you're building it. And so the decision analysis then proceeded, applying the rest of the criteria, as you see on the screen there. And our current schedule with daily English came out on top. Because it was a top scored schedule, we conducted then a potential problem analysis, which again, we're looking for potential problems that schedule could have, right? Concerns and maybe some barriers that schedule could have. After when they did that work, they came up with the following considerations that they wanted us to review. And so if we were to move forward with this middle school schedule with daily English, they wanted us to review how that daily English would impact the number of electives for students. In addition, they wanted to look at how specially designed instruction would be delivered in this daily English model. Let me go in a little bit of detail on that second bullet. Currently, some of our students with IEPs have their specially designed instruction taught in an academic lab class. That's in addition to their math and English. And that takes the place of an elective. And so the committee was very, they wanted us to really look deep as far as how could we integrate that instruction, the specially designed instruction, into a daily math and a daily English class if we did go forward with that model. In addition, the committee asked what type of professional development would be needed if, again, we move forward with this daily English model. And again, a big question would be what type of additional staffing would be needed with this model. Yeah. Finally, and this was a big one for the committee, they wanted to make sure that if we went forward that we had a strong communication plan where, one, we told families about this change on the earlier end, and we were very clear as far as what this schedule meant for their students. And finally, they wanted to look at how could we add additional in-person class time for high school credit-bearing courses. Currently, we use an asynchronous model to deliver those additional minutes just to make sure we meet that 140-hour threshold for those classes. They wanted to see if there was additional option for in-class, an in-class option for that. So this is the screen you've been waiting for. So this is the committee recommendation. Again, that took six meetings, 12 hours to arrive at this, but I'm very proud of this. The committee chose the current middle school schedule with daily English as their schedule to put forward. They are proposing that we implement daily English 7 and English 8 for the 2025-26 school year but make no changes to advanced English. So again, let me kind of summarize that. So the committee wants to wait 1 year to implement this plan because they want to make sure that when we look at those considerations, we do a good job at making sure we fulfill what we need to do in order to make that work. And they want so we do that with, we have a strong plan. In addition, this would not affect advanced English. Advanced English would still be every other day, as it is now. English 7 and English 8 would be every day. Our next steps would be to create a team to further investigate the recommendations and considerations, and then provide an update to the school board in the fall of 2024. And that concludes my update on the middle school bell schedule. I would love to have any questions or any comments at this time.
Board members?
I
any-
do. I just want to say, I appreciate the thoroughness of that project because the last thing you want to do is try to move forward, implement something, and then find out, oh, that's not going to work very well, and then try to backtrack it. It just would be a mess. So the thoroughness of this is wonderful.
Well, thank you. I think that's a
Yeah.
great result of the protocol is you
Yeah.
really look at these schedules very deeply to make sure that you don't choose something that's going to backfire with you,
And my
when you
hat's off
implement.
to the committee that did such a thorough job at
a doubt.
analyzing that.
Anyone else?
Thank you for all the hard work.
Yeah,
Yep, thank you for all the hard work.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sherlock.
definitely. Thank you, Dr. Sherlock.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. Shandor, I believe the next thing on the agenda is the operating budget?
Yes, Mr. Bowen, our Chief Financial Officer, he's going to provide some information related to the state budget. Mr. Bowen?
Thank you, Dr. Shandor, Madam Chair, members of the board. As I'm sure you know, the General Assembly concluded its session on Saturday, and so this evening I'm going to provide you with the summary of those budget actions that were included in their final budget. First, I thought I'd share you just a comparison of the state budgets that we've seen so far. We have started with the governor's budget, and currently what's in the superintendent's proposed budget and was presented to you in February is based on the governor's budget. Then the General Assembly separately went through their own budget process. The Senate provided us with their version, which was $112 million, the House version, $105.4 million. And then they had to go through the reconciliation process with the conferees. And what we see right now as a final budget is $106.7 million. This is $300,000 more than what's currently in the budget. But I caution us to, before we do anything with that $300,000 is that I don't think we're done with the process. And I'll share that information with you in the next slide. So here's the summary of actions. These are the major actions that the General Assembly took. So they replaced the governor's 1% bonus with a 3% compensation increase. The next two items, this was kind of surprising to me. And again, we don't have a calc tool, so we don't know the exact details. What we're talking about is just totals right now. But the General Assembly eliminated prevention, intervention, and remediation funding and the existing at-risk funding model. And they're replacing that with a new at-risk funding model. So we lost 4.7, we're gaining 2.8. The net impact on that is a loss of $1.9 million. So that is significant to us. The next two items are related, where they eliminated the current English learner staffing standard. We lose $470,000, but they're replacing it with a new EL staffing standard at $480,000. So the net is $10,000 to us. What that tells me is that the ratio has decreased. So right now it's one teacher for every 50 students that receive services or that are eligible to receive services. That's been reduced to maybe 45 or 40. We don't know the exact number, but because they're giving us more money, that number has been decreased, and it may require that we hire additional EL staff to meet that staffing standard. So we'll have to wait till we receive the calculation tool from VDOE to make that exact determination. The General Assembly is restoring grocery tax hold harmless funding. 2 years ago, the state eliminated sales tax on groceries, and in that process, they provided us over the biennium of 2023 and 2024 hold harmless funding in the loss of that sales tax. The General Assembly has included that hold harmless funding for the next biennium. And then they've also adopted, this is part of the governor's proposal to expand the sales tax base on digital services between businesses. Currently, that's not being taxed, and sales tax. And so they've adopted part of that proposal. Now, the other part of the governor's proposal was to provide tax cuts to the tune of $1 billion, and then this expanded tax base was going to increase taxes to the tune of $1 billion. So they only gave the governor part of his request. And this is where I think we're going to be a little bit vulnerable, probably in the grocery tax and the sales tax base, because there were two primary priorities of the governor that were not funded in the General Assembly's budget. The first being the $2 billion request for an arena in Northern Virginia, and then the $1 billion tax cuts. So where that takes us moving forward is the school board, we're going to bring the budget to you that you've already seen with no changes on the 25th. The governor has until April 8th to act on the General Assembly's budget. He can line item veto, which we expect is going to happen. And then the General Assembly is going to reconvene. The governor is going to make amendments to the budget. They probably won't agree on everything, but at some point they're going to have to agree, because we're going to lose some of this funding in the interim. But in a final budget, we should have some negotiated amount with where the governor gets part of his budget and K-12 gets part of its budget. But I will tell you what happened last year. We had a similar scenario. We didn't have an FY24 budget until September. And so we hope it doesn't take that long, but certainly it could take us into the next fiscal year before we find out what our final state funding is. If that happens, we may need to pull back on some of the proposals that we've included in the superintendent's proposed budget. But certainly we'll be following the governor's actions and the General Assembly's actions through the month of April, and hopefully we'll have a reconciled budget between those two parties here at the end of April. Now, the Board of Supervisors is scheduled to approve their FY25 budget on May 7th. That will include the local contribution to the schools. It will also include our FY25 CIP. And then if we have a final budget between the state, then we will bring those changes to the school board at the May 20th business meeting. If not, then we probably won't bring any changes until the final changes occur between the governor and the General Assembly. And that concludes my presentation this evening.
Any questions? I guess everybody's just in holding pattern to see what.
Yes,
Yeah,
ma'am.
I have one
Oh,
question.
sorry.
I'm just trying to find my button.
Mr. Pivot.
So in the General Assembly, when they reconvenes, like now, are we expecting it on the House or on the Senate side, or we still don't know who's going to be pushing back on that budget?
Don't know who will be pushing back. So we have the House and the House and the Senate are both in the same party. And so right now they're taking the position of K-12 over the governor's priorities. But here's how it works. The governor has extreme power when it comes to the budget in Virginia, because he has that line item veto. So they didn't include the arena in their budget. Had they included it, the governor could have line item vetoed K-12 funding, but he could have kept the arena funding in. So this is kind of a song and dance that they play. They don't include it, then they come back for that special session, where then they have to, they're focused on just a couple of things: the arena, the tax cuts, and then K-12 funding. And so that's what I expect is going to happen. We see that time and time again when there are differences between governor and General Assembly.
So I know it's kind of like up in the air, like how much will be getting approved or not approved. Do we have any idea of what impact could be negatively, like an amount of money that can be withheld from the budget for us?
A lot can change. What concerns me about what I see here is that 910,000 and the 180,000. So I think $1 million is easily at stake as they continue to work through their final processes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr.
so
Bowen.
much, Mr. Brown.
Sorry.
Sorry. All right, and once again, moving along, we've had some wonderful presentations so far in keeping us up to speed. I believe the next one is Capital Projects Report. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Ms. Fairman. Fresh off the injured reserve list is Mr. Mark Shearhart, who's going to make his way to the podium, our Associate Director for Capital Plans. He's going to provide us a summary regarding current and future capital projects. Mr. Shearhart, I don't think that is your presentation. There we go.
Good evening, members, Madam Chair and members of the board. Here's the capital projects report for the month of March. So as usual, we're talking about Seaford Elementary School. Finally, we're closing in on this one here. I know we keep saying that, but it is getting closer and closer. The contractor is continuing to replace or install screens around the rooftop heating and air conditioning equipment on the building. This will protect the heating and air conditioning equipment and also make the building look much nicer from the road. They've also been commissioning the HVAC control systems. The engineer's been on board there, and I've got a picture with that. The contractor has also been whittling down the remaining punch list items. I went through the building with him this last week, marking off things that they had completed. They're down to mostly just paint items, and then they have some work remaining in the courtyard. Unfortunately, the Seaford Road repaving has been rescheduled or pushed back again to April 1st, but the contractor believes they can get it done with the spring break. They should be able to get it done with the 5 days there. This is one of the punch list items. We had some wiring, some underground wiring that was going bad that fed to the kitchen panels, which are on the right-hand side here. So we had the contractor replace some overhead wiring from the panel that's on the left-hand side to the panels that are on the right-hand side. So this is some work, a punch list item that they took care of 2 weekends ago. Here's a picture of the engineer on the right-hand side and the controls technician on the left-hand side. They're looking at a graphic image there of one of the heating and air conditioning units at Seaford. So we have a graphic representation of the entire building. They can see all the room temperatures, and they can see the drill down into the individual units and make sure that the units are running properly. What they're doing here is they're commissioning it. They're checking the control system, make sure it controls the compressors, the fans, the reversing valves, all those different components in the units. And it also takes measurements, temperature measurements and humidity and different things like that. They can see all this on the graphical representation. This is a valuable tool for our HVAC technicians and also for our help desk. They looked at this to see what's going on in a room if they get a call or a complaint. So I know Dr. Carroll has talked to you about the drain line next to the football field at Seaford, and they finally got the last piece of pipe in. This is a picture of the last piece of pipe. They've been waiting and waiting and waiting. It was just too muddy, too much rain, and they couldn't get in. So they finally got the last piece of pipe inside. We had to take a picture of it. And they've got the riprap stone around it. So that drainage pipe is completely done next to the ball field. So we go on to Bruton High School. And this contractor is doing phenomenal work on the roof up there. They're just stomping on it, getting that work done up there. Again, like Dr. Carroll shared last month, the contractor is starting very, very early in the morning, trying to make as much of the noise before students get into the building to protect the academic day. Because the weather is beginning to moderate now, they plan to start coating over the spring break. This was not planned until June, so they're starting very, very early here, and they plan to get this roof done in the fall of 2024. So here's a picture of the roof and some of the work that's going on. So to explain here what a blister is or what a bubble is in the roof, this is a cap sheet on the roof. It's a top sheet, and somehow, for some reason, it gets moisture into the cap sheet, and as the sun shines on it, it creates a water vapor inside there and it expands and creates a bubble. Or a blister. So they have to cut those all out. For us to get the 20-year warranty, we have to remove all those blisters in the roof. So that's what it looks like now. We get all those blisters cut out. You see the different patches here. And then they'll coat that entire roof with the coating, and they'll give us a 20-year warranty. Now here is a little bit more invasive. You see in the foreground, you see the white bundles there. Those are pallets of roof insulation. And this is in some of these areas on the roof where they had to cut out the insulation because the roof was actually wet. So they had to cut that out, put this roof insulation in, and again, patch it. And then once it's patched, then they can go ahead and coat it and give us that 20-year warranty. So that's what's going on up at Bruton. So we do have a few other capital projects going on. Dr. Carroll talked about Tabb Middle School last month. I talked to the contractor today. He's receiving the remainder of his HVAC equipment is being shipped out this week and then also the last week of March, so he should have everything ready for summer. They are planning to work on Tabb Middle School, replacing 6 units during spring break. At Mount Vernon, the controls contractors there have been replacing the control system, the HVAC control system on one whole entire wing is completely done in that building already, and they're in the process of doing the other wing over the spring break, so they're making great progress there. When the HVAC contractor comes on site, they'll be able to just hook up the new control system to the new air conditioning equipment, and they'll be ready to go this summer. So we do have a couple other projects going on here, Tab High and Tab Middle School locker room makeovers. I've met with the principals and the athletic staff members there at the schools and to talk about what to do in these locker rooms. We're looking at replacing lockers, lighting, painting the locker rooms, and also either repairing floor tile or else sandblasting the floors and putting down a new epoxy floor coating in the locker rooms just to dress them up and make them look a lot more presentable. And then we also have the same thing going on at York High School and York Middle School. So again, met with the principals and the staff members there, and we're doing pretty much the same thing there, replacing lockers, painting new light fixtures, and epoxy coating the floors. And that's the end of my report for this evening. Do you have any questions for me?
Just one. I'm glad to see you're back and up and about. And the other thing is, I know there's a neighbor, a resident next to Seaford that's going to be happy to know that that's finally getting paid. That's been a long, long process. They did say during spring break is the plan for them to
That's
pay
the plan,
that.
yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I hope that comes to fruition. It happens. I hope so. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have one question for you,
Okay.
Mr. Shearhart. Anytime someone mentions wet on any kind of a surface, like a ceiling, wall, or anything, I automatically think of mold potential. Is there anything that's ever done, and it may not be an issue with the roof, because I'm not as familiar with roofs, but, to ensure that there's no mold that comes out of the wet on a roof, anything like that?
Okay, so there's a corrugated metal deck, and then the roof insulation sits on top of that corrugated metal
Okay.
deck. So the water's leaked through the roof membrane and got into the insulation, so we're removing it before it can leak into the building. There are a few areas on Bruton High School that are leaking into the building, and so we're trying to get as much of this nailed down and that wet insulation out as fast as possible to prevent any type of mold or anything like that.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Wonderful to see you back.
it's good to be back.
Thank you so much for the details on that and the breakdown so quickly. That was great. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
And I know we all appreciate that. The next thing on the agenda is a presentation for the policy writing services. And board members, in your folders, you should have a hard copy of the flyers that VSBA had sent. Thank you very much to our new board clerk, Ms. Howard, for printing these for us so that we could have this during the presentation. Dr. Shandor, could you introduce this? And it's going to be via Zoom.
Sure. So on our screen, there is a face up on the screen now. You could all see her. This is Miss Elizabeth Hewing. I've known Elizabeth for a number of years, and she's worked with Miss Berry. She's the Director of Legal and Policy Services at the Virginia School Boards Association, and she's joining us obviously via Zoom to share information regarding policies and services. Ms. Berry, I didn't know if there was anything you wanted to add before.
No, just we have the information on board docs that our policies do guide the school board. We update them every 4 years by practice. We're required to update them every 5 years, so we do go above and beyond that. And they are updated as needed whenever legislation changes, case law changes, or VDOE requires changes.
All right. Elizabeth, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Shandor, thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate the fact that your new clerk made the copies of the documents that we sent, I guess it was a couple of days ago. So I'm glad to know that you have those in front of you. And what I want to do this evening is mention some of the things that are in those documents and also give you a chance to ask any questions that you might have. As I think you all know, York County School Board was a member of VSBA Policy Services starting in 2011 until just a couple of months ago. So a lot of what I'm going to go over is probably more a review, since you have already been familiar with VSBA Policy Services, but we're happy to do that. So VSBA Policy Services provides what we call compliance-based school board policies. And what that means is that the policies that we write and update and provide to members of policy services are designed to help Virginia school boards comply with the law. It's that simple. And as you know, there's a lot of different laws that apply to school boards. And so that's one of the reasons we have so many policies. Members of VSBA Policy Services have access both to existing VSBA policies, all of the ones that are current, and also receive at least 2 policy updates every year. The 2 that we schedule and do on a regular schedule every year come out in February and May. The May policy update usually is the largest policy update of the year, and most of the policies in the May update are based on whatever that year's General Assembly does. So when the General Assembly enacts new laws for Virginia or updates existing laws, those are reflected in the VSBA's May policy update. When VSBA revises or writes new policies, we distribute them by posting them to a password-protected portion of the VSBA website. Whenever that password changes, we give it to 2 people in each division that is a member of Policy Services. And those 2 people are the policy contact that is designated by the superintendent and the superintendent. And then those people distribute it throughout the division. Different divisions take very different approaches to that. In some divisions, it is widely distributed. In other divisions, not so widely. And that is entirely a local decision. In addition to the written policies, written sample policies, membership in VSBA Policy Services also allows school board members, superintendents, policy contacts, and counsel for divisions that have in-house counsel to access to me, to the Director of Legal and Policy Services at VSBA. I spend a good portion of every day on the phone or on email having conversations with board members and superintendents and policy contacts who have questions about sample policies or may have questions about whether we're working on a particular policy, when something might be coming out, something like that. In addition to the 2 regularly scheduled policy updates in February and May, we also do additional policy updates as necessary. For example, a couple of years ago, when the federal Title IX regulations got amended, they came out late spring, not on a schedule that we could incorporate them into one of the existing policy updates. So we did an off-cycle policy update to incorporate those. And since it looks like the revisions to the Title IX regulations will probably come out again late spring, maybe early summer, we'll probably be doing another off-cycle one this year. As your counsel just mentioned, Virginia law requires every school board policy to be reviewed at least every 5 years. We also, that's part of what Policy Services provides, is an update as required. There are a couple of policies that the General Assembly in the past few years has put on an expedited schedule. For example, the student concussion policy, you are required to review every 2 years. So we do that for you. So we review them every 5 years or more frequently as required by law. And of course, depending on what the General Assembly does, some get reviewed more frequently than that. We sometimes get questions about how VSBA develops sample policies. We monitor both state and federal law for legal developments. One of the ways we do that is working closely with VSBA's Director of Governmental Relations. He keeps us informed about what's going on in the General Assembly while it's happening. We also take a look at the list of all bills that get passed by the General Assembly, which is important because even though most of the laws that impact school boards come through the education committees in the General Assembly, not all of them do. For example, FOIA bills are not education specific, so they go through committees that are not the education committees. So that's one of the reasons it's very helpful to work with our governmental relations people. The last thing that I want to mention before I open it up for questions is to answer the question of who writes VSBA sample policies. I'm a lawyer. I've been a member of the Virginia Bar for almost, 39 years. Been working in the field of education law for 23 years. So, and I'm the one who writes them. We have a small staff, but all of the writing and updating is done by a lawyer. And all of the conversations that VSBA staff has about our policies all come through the policy department, legal and policy department. Legal and policy are pretty much inseparable under the VSBA system since we do a compliance-based model of policy drafting. So I know you've got the two documents that we sent. I don't want to read you every word on them, but I think I kind of hit the high spots. So if anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to try to answer them.
Are there any questions?
I do have one. So Ms. Ewing, what happens if one of your sample policies we've adopted as provided is challenged for legal sufficiency? Is there any protection to our division for that?
There is the policy services contract that divisions that are members of policy services sign every year. That's the membership document, addresses that. And it actually has never happened in the 23 years I've been doing this, but we do stand behind our policies. So I think I know at one time at least you had a copy of the contract, and that is clearly addressed in there.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Ms. Ewing, could you tell me how many of the 131 school districts in Virginia use the policy services?
Sure. Currently, I think 120, there are 8 who are not. So but we're actually kind of careful about how we word that. There are currently 132 members of policy services, but some of those are regional programs as opposed to traditional school boards. So when we say there's 132 members, that makes it sound like every division is a member. That's not quite true. There are 8 currently, including York, that are not.
And I did have one more clarification. When I saw legal and policy services, I was under the assumption that we didn't have any legal advice through VSBA, and I clarified that through an email to you. We do have legal advice from VSBA because of our membership. We just don't have the policy part of it, which is a separate entity in and of itself.
Correct. And what the legal services primarily consist of is access to me. Some divisions also use that for amicus briefs, but primarily most divisions use it for legal conversations. Divisions such as York that have in-house counsel generally don't use that as often, but that is an important part of the legal services.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any further questions or comments? Thank you so much, Ms. Ewing. I appreciate your time and being available to do the presentation via Zoom, as well as sending the flyers with information that we can go back and peruse and have online.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. All right.
So, Madam Chair, I just have one comment, or actually a question for you. I know with SMBA, they're going to be at our next meeting to discuss.
It's SBMA.
SBMA, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
School Board Member Alliance, to ask them questions. But I know when we started this process a couple months ago, I was in agreement to look to see if it's cheaper to do policy services, absolutely,
Right.
if it's the same or similar. And our board attorney was supposed to gather that information and do that. But you can't get policy services from this other organization unless you're a member, is that correct? You have to be a member, I mean.
There are 3 of us who are members of School Board Member
Right.
Alliance.
So our attorney tried to join and through Ms. Ford when she was here, and they denied her access.
Well, the policy services for that will be explained when they do their presentation on the 25th at that meeting. So that would be a question to ask to be able to do those comparisons, because I don't want to speak for them.
Okay, I mean, I just think we're wasting time by not doing this when updates have already come out.
Well, we'll handle this for, we've already made arrangements that SBMA will be doing a presentation at the meeting on the 25th, and we'll be able to make a decision then.
Well, we've already approved
Thank
our
you.
budget for paying for the services too, as
Mr.
well.
Richardson? Okay, we need to move on. I've
I'm
already
trying to
said-
move on. I think we need to
Yep.
make a motion to pay for the services.
No,
I'd like
there's,
to make a motion.
this is a work session. There's no voting at a work session, so everything is gathered here for
Are you
information.
denying my motion?
And that we don't vote
If
during
you're
work
denying my
sessions.
motion, then you're not representing all my constituents in my division, my district.
Mr.
Well,
Richardson?
and we voted at the last 2
We
work
have.
sessions.
No, we voted at the one that was a work session, that was a work session / special session, and we need to move on right now. Thank you
Because
very
we
much,
can
I
wait till-
appreciate
we
it.
can wait till July.
Excuse me.
We can
Okay,
wait till July.
as chair and in following Robert's rules, the work session does not have voting. We will be handling that at the March 25th meeting when we will hear the presentation from the other organization.
Thank you,
And
Madam
I
Chair. You
appreciate
said
it.
everything you needed to say to everybody out there. Thank you.
All righty, moving along with the discussion of things for this. Let's see, that was the last presentation. The next thing is elementary attendance zone balancing options. Dr. Shandor.
Thank you, Ms. Fairman. And board members, again, this evening, Dr. Carroll is here to share brief information for your discussion this evening related to elementary attendance zone balancing options. Dr. Carroll, I'll turn it over to you, and then we'll turn it over to the board.
All right, thank you, Dr. Shandor, Madam Chair, members of the board. I've reviewed the public input to date on the presented options for elementary zone adjustments related to us so far. The following summary data incorporates the public hearing, emails and phone calls that I've received directly, and all communications on the subject placed in Let's Talk, and that's including the ones that have gone to the board members directly. This data does not include any communications board members have received through phone calls, interactions, and emails that were not placed in Let's Talk. So just to recap that information, the list totals 11 community members. One was the speaker at the public hearing in favor of Plan E, and one other person who also supported following the recommendations of Arkbridge and the stakeholder committee. A couple of others included a petition from Winders Pond for their students to stay at Grafton Bethel. 2 that were just against rezoning generally. There were 3 individual requests from different neighborhoods in the lower county. One of those people was also not in favor of rezoning generally. And then we had 4 from Creekside Landing opposed to moving to Waller Mill. Tonight's discussion's been on the calendar since November for board members to have discussion on the topic after hearing from community individuals and through the public hearing. Also tonight, we have Pretty Mather from Arkbridge, as well as myself, to answer any clarifying or technical questions you may have. So with that, I'll turn things over to the chair.
Thank you. So are there any questions or comments regarding this?
Since I'm the only one affected with the Upper County plan, I don't like the way that we're doing it because we are taking, I understand it's a nice little pocket with Queens Lake, Kings Grant, Cobble Creek, and Creekside. It's a nice compact plan to move them, but these are old established neighborhoods. And one of the concerns that I got from one of my parents was that they went to Magruder and their kids want to go to Magruder. And so we have a lot of legacy kids in my district, as well as I'm looking at it that they are old established neighborhoods, but yet the newest neighborhoods, which I would think would be the best ones, best suited to be moved, which would be like Whitaker's Mill and the Marquee properties. I don't know how many that would generate, but I would think that those would be better to go. Or if not that, if we needed a higher concentration of kids, because I'm trying to preserve the demographics, I'm trying to preserve the performance of both schools. And I know my area very, very well. And I would look at Panther Place, those on 143, maybe some of Carver Gardens at that end, to go over to Waller Mill.
Any other comments? Ms. Pretty, I didn't know if you had anything to say, in reaction to what Mr. Schaefer just said.
I'll add just a couple comments, and I think Dr. Carroll will as well. I think one of the things when we're trying to rezone, I think it's very important to keep in mind that some of the moves for Lower County, and when we did this a few years ago, we were making changes that as the Lower County grew. So, for example, I live in a particular area. We drive by Tab Elementary School, which is right next to my neighborhood, and we drive 2 miles or whatever down to Mount Vernon. So I would just want the board to think about, and Mr. Schaefer, I would want you to think about, if you have, I understand that families grew up there and went to those schools to Magruder, but if you see that on a map, you're basically driving past other neighbors. Transportation would be driving past. I don't know if you have an illustration of that, Dr. Carroll, to share, but we're trying to make this as, I think when we met with the board members in our 2-on-2s, we talked about least amount of movement is possible. We understand we have to make moves, or we're going to be looking at, other hard surfaces, taking basketball courts from Magruder. We don't want to do that either. And that campus is already pretty restricted. So I don't know if you have that example you want to share?
Ms. Mather, if you have that to pull up, that we did work up a drawing of just the Marquee Hill developments because that gave us enough students to do so. But what you'll see basically is a big donut hole in the middle of the Magruder zone. It does create some transportation issues. And we also, in 2017, there was talk of a the Carver Gardens section going to Waller Mill. And so that was dismissed at that time. So this would be a similar type move. And so that's, could you go to slide 2? And I think it gives you a little better as you pull out. Now you can see what that would look like, and that would be the Marquee only.
Can you make that full screen, please, Ms. Mather? Thank you.
You discuss Carver Garden, and you'll see if you just go due west, you'll see Carver Garden right at that interchange of 199 and 64, I believe that is, or 143? 143, right. Right, I drive past it every day. You'd think I know that. So you see Carver Gardens there. So that was, in 2017, they looked at that and dismissed that. So it's essentially the same type of rezoning option. The other thing to remember is just that York County just has some weird geography. I mean, that's just the bottom line. This is a difficult place to do rezoning, but I hear all of Mr. Schaefer's comments there, and I get them. Ms. Mather, do you have anything to add just from your experience, either this specifically or in your experience with working with other school divisions on issues like this?
I do understand the concern here, but then creating these kinds of donut holes.
Can it be louder?
They're going to have to turn the volume up in the back.
What the concern would be, I can understand that Creekside Landing has been in Magruder, and that's where they want to be. But isolating or picking or creating these donut holes is not a good policy.
So we're either going to have a donut hole on the east or a donut hole on the, what would that be, north?
Well, it wouldn't be as much of a donut hole if you're taking this area because it's directly next to Waller Mill.
Yes, Ms. Mather, if you could pull up the Plan B, C, and D or Plan E, just so that we can see what that looks like. But yes, all of the other plans have a contiguous piece working off of the geography from the Waller Mill zone.
Sure, just give me a minute. I'm just going to share, okay? So here, this is in Plan A, we had looked at these neighborhoods, and we had tried to maintain contiguity. And in Plan B, C, and D, we came down here, and this is, you can see Creekside Landing in all the neighborhoods, which are close to Waller Mill. And then in Plan E, we tried to narrow down the neighborhoods, but Creekside Landing happens to be in all the plans, primarily because it's contiguous to the Waller Mill area, and also it's closer to Waller Mill.
Yeah, and I would add, for reference sake, I believe that marquee development is around where the M on the Magruder map is there. So to give you an idea of that distance.
I just wanted to say, just my 2 cents, that when we met on the 2-on-2s about this, my point was, what do we do that disrupts the least amount of people? Because no matter what you do, no matter which plan you take, somebody is not going to be happy. We have people that get disrupted, and we try to look at how few people we disrupt when we do this. But totally recognize that no matter what plan we choose, there's always going to be someone or a few that it's just not, they're not going to be happy. And it's a real tough decision because you're trying to see what is the good for everybody or the most people involved in the least amount of impact. And it's a tough decision, it really is. But that's really kind of where I land, is how do we disrupt the fewest amount of people when we lay this out?
I understand what you're saying, but I know my schools and I know my neighborhoods, and that would be a very huge disruption to Magruder to lose those neighborhoods, big time.
And I can appreciate that. I'm speaking, obviously, I'm District 3. your group is impacted a lot more than, we have some impact here, but in my district, I haven't gotten any comments or anything about that. I'm sure you have, and I do appreciate that. I'm just saying that my mindset is, how do we disrupt the fewest amount of people?
I used to live in Royal Grant way back, and I remember at the time, my neighborhood was Watermill and then got redistricted. So is that something that was historically, like before with Magruder, that area, and then for a short period of time was moved away and then brought back? Do you remember? Or do you know anything about that?
I don't remember that one.
It was like,
I think it was just before you came on the board.
Yeah, it was back, 2000 you said?
Like 10, 12, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, that was before I came on.
It's before I was.
So one other question, Dr. Carroll. We had talked about the possibility of phasing in one of the schools due to the traffic concerns. Do you have any update on that, or are you still exploring that?
Well, we can. We're looking for direction from the board. Any type of hybrid is a possibility, any type of phasing in. We do know that with DARE, we would have to study that if we knew that that was the direction that the board wanted to go, that we would have to look at whether we could handle that with a CIP. I would just like to make a comment about Mrs. Goodwin's comment. Yes, it gets difficult to do so, and that's one of the reasons why both Arkbridge and the stakeholder committee endorsed Plan E, but I do want to remind the board that Arkbridge thought that Plan E also didn't go far enough as far as creating space at Magruder, and felt like, and so did the stakeholder committee, that the board should consider whether we should go for a more aggressive plan to make room.
I appreciate that. Are there any other comments or questions? Thank you, Dr. Carroll. And thank you, Ms. Mather.
Thank you.
I just want to remind the board that on March 25th, the board is going to vote, make a recommendation so we can move forward. So if there needs to be further conversation or phone calls after this meeting, I think that would, help us get there on the 25th.
Yes, I agree. Thank you very much. Now, the next thing on the agenda is the policy discussion focusing on Section L of the policy manual.
Yes, Dr. Carroll is just going to stay right there, and he's going to cover recommendations for the quadrennial policy review of Section L, Education Agency Relations. Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, Dr. Shandor. Board members, after review and revision by the superintendent, chief officers, the assistant county attorney, Section L, Education Agency Relations of the York County School Board Policy Manual is ready for your review. The policy is exactly what it says, Education Agency Relations. So how does the division interact with other agencies and types of students? So there are only 7 policies in this section, and if you're looking for them, we have red line versions in board docs. Now, with those 7 policies, staff recommends 3 restatements. That's LA, LB, and LEA. And there are 4 that are recommended for revision, and I'll give you a brief summary of each of those. So the first one is policy LBD, home instruction. We included additional language to comply with Virginia and U.S. code that includes allowing homeschooled students to participate in junior ROTC programs. This was due to change in, as I said, in U.S. code. We have already placed it into practice. However, because we've pushed this back a few months, presenting this policy section, we do need to codify it into policy. The second policy is LC, charter schools. We included additional language driven by the addition to, once again, Code of Virginia and U.S. code that includes additional discrimination language that's already in some of our other policies, requirements for application, a new requirement for the school board to establish a regulation in regard to the application process, and some grammar and legal reference corrections. Section LE, or policy file LEB, advanced alternative courses for credit. This adds language about the ability to earn post-secondary credits concurrent with their high school diploma, credit transfer, and middle school enrollment. It also corrects some grammar and legal references. And the last one is policy LI, relations with educational accreditation agencies, and it corrects language under the new exemplar school recognition program. So the recommendation is for the board to schedule the proposed revisions for a first reading, and I welcome any questions you have at this time.
Are there any questions or comments? Thank you for providing these, and I was able to print them out. It was very helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll.
Thank you, Dr. Carroll. Next on the agenda is, actually, you have board norms and protocols, followed by the board retreat. And if I could ask the board's discretion here, there's a lot in the board norms and protocols for us to cover and to see how we were going to put that together. And I would propose that the discussion and decisions would be best for a retreat work, that would allow us to really dive into it, discuss what works, what doesn't, what needs to be changed, if anything, and take a look at that.
I agree 100%. Yep.
All right, so are there any other comments about that? Okay, then moving into having a retreat, I think it's a good idea. One thing with the board, we need to be focused on trainings that support the required school board work from the Virginia law with the SOQs. Regarding trainings, take a look at the norms and protocols, as well as making sure our strategic plan has measurables so that we're making sure that we're spending money on things that will actually improve those measurables. To take a look at that, was taking a look at everything, possible dates to check for a local location. I believe it needs to be local so that if citizens want to attend, it's easy for them to do that rather than travel across the state. I believe the Board of Supervisors has had it at the American Revolution Museum here in Yorktown in the past, that may be a possibility for some other ones. So throwing that out there, I looked at both a Friday and a Saturday since that was proposed for going outside of the area, and was looking at, and a lot of these dates will depend on if we can get the location for this. But Friday, the 19th of April, or Saturday, the 20th of April, Friday, the 26th of April, or Saturday, the 27th of April, Friday, the 3rd of May, or Friday, the 10th of May, or Saturday, the 11th of May, just throwing that out there.
Madam Chair, if I may suggest,
Sure.
Our board clerk, like they do for some of our special meetings, could try to set up some dates through you, throw them out there to the other board members. Once we get a date, we can find a location somewhere.
Right.
I think the biggest thing is to get 5 board members that can have the same date.
Well, I would remind the board that at the January 8th meeting, we had February 23rd as a
We did.
tentative date.
Yeah, we already had a date already.
And I did communicate with the board, I can't remember the exact date, but I sent an email asking for agenda topics. So we're 3 months in. So I'm fine with, obviously, we'll work with the board, but I also have a number of staff members to get with, so you're trying to
Right.
now look at 10 to 15 different days. So
Right,
staff was prepared on the 23rd or
Dr.
we were
Dr.
at least.
Shandor, we can't go back and
Can I
change the
finish?
date. We can't go back and change the date on the 23rd.
I understand
So we have
that.
to look forward and
I
set
am
that.
simply making a point that it's not just 5 board members' calendars. You have to take into consideration all the staff time to prepare for
Right.
it. And, the spring is very busy
Right.
for our team. So obviously,
Dr. Shannon-
we're open to whatever the board would like. But I would just ask for, as we're selecting those dates, that we consider staff time as well.
think
Shandor,
even.
what would you recommend? Like, no, would it be weekend better or the workday?
Again, on January 8th, we set the date for February 23rd.
Which was Friday,
Which
I
was a
believe.
month and a half in advance. And it took multiple conversations around the board table to come up with that date. So it's not as easy as we think it is. Let's just pick a date and move forward.
And we may not need all the additional presentations in the initial, I mean, just the board norms and protocols and just to get that done.
Well, I do
and-
think that we need to be focused on trainings because that's important, especially with three of us now on the board, that we need to make sure that we're following through and making sure that we're doing everything that's required under the SOQs, having that training, taking a look at everything so that we're making sure that we're spending money correctly and that we're focused on student achievement and making sure what's best for the classrooms along those lines.
Well, there's
And-
budget workshops through VSBA, but.
What I'm hearing is that the most important thing we need to do right now is to establish a date, and that a date that works for everybody in the not-so-near future.
Right. And then what I can do is, if I can ask the board clerk to put out, to start gathering the dates, I can give you the dates that I had put down, and we'll see what we can work on with that. And then I'll put an email out to all of the board members asking for the training topics you'd like. We already know that we're going to be taking a look at norms and protocols and making sure that we're looking at student achievement and what's needed there. Is there anything in addition?
I have a question. You mentioned two things. You mentioned that the board needs to make sure that we're spending money appropriately. You also mentioned that we need to make sure we're doing what's best for students.
Well, it's
My-
making it on the measurables.
May I
Dr.
speak?
Shandor. Sure.
If we're going to have professional decorum, I'm asking if I could have the floor without interruption.
Yes, Dr. Shandor. However, if I could just say that, because it's answering your question, what I was saying with the budget, it was making sure that we were handling measurables for the strategic plan and things like that. That's some of the training that we've had since we've been elected. That's one of the things that we need to be looking at. It's not saying that we're not spending money wisely. It's just making sure that we're handling those measurables. And so I was just answering that part of your question. Is there anything further? Okay. All righty, we'll be gathering that, and I'll be working with the rest of the school board as well as Dr. Shandor and staff to see, how we can do this and make sure that this is a local retreat and that we're doing what's needed to be done. Anything else? All right. Motion to...
I make a motion to adjourn.
to adjourn, thank you. Ms. Goodwin made a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Oh, we didn't vote.
Yeah, that's right. Sorry about that. We've adjourned. Thank you. I appreciate your time.